What are we talking about? Oh,
Oh, welcome back to Teachers Talk, where the last thing you want to hear is, what are we talking about today, right when you hit record? My name is Brian Higgins. I teach English, drama, avid at Wenatchee High School in Wenatchee, Washington, Central Washington. So, and then I'll just pass it over to my two co-hosts before we start talking about stuff.
I'll go, I guess. My name is Molly Ravitz, and I teach science at Cascade High School in Leavenworth.
And my name is Malia Renner-Singer, and I teach social studies and AVID at Cascade High School in Leavenworth.
So before we get talking about introing into our second season or second semester, I mean, you could say, it's been a little bit of a break, and we've been very busy because a lot of things have changed. But before we even hear that, there's a whole bunch of fails that we want to talk about. So, Molly, you texted me today very excited about your fail, and I have never seen someone so excited to share. So how did you fail today?
Okay, so it's a long story, and I'm going to try to make it succinct. So in the fall, I remember reading articles about teachers who were teaching on Zoom and teaching in person at the same time. This was like in a lot of schools in the South, and I was like, that's my worst nightmare. I'm so glad my district isn't doing that. We'll never get there. And then fast forward to March 15th, that is exactly what we're doing. And about a month ago, I listened to a podcast. It was an episode of The Daily, I think, that was doing like a 5-part series about Odessa, Texas. And they interviewed this teacher who was talking about this one time she was like teaching in person and on Zoom at the same time and had forgot that she had muted herself on Zoom and then was teaching class for 20 minutes. And then she remembered and went back in the chat, and all the students were like, what's going on? Does she know that she's muted? Are we supposed to be listening? And so that happened to me today. But it's even funnier because I had there's like a series of fails that led up to that. And that like, I got to school, at my normal time, was doing my work. And then at 8 a.m., there were a bunch of kids in the hallway because there was a teacher who was supposed to be gone today, and he had put in for a sub, but no one had picked it up, or the sub had to cancel or something. And so there's all these kids in the hallway at 8:01, and I was like, well, come to my classroom, because you can't just stand in the hallway here. And so I had to sub for him in the morning and in the afternoon because our schedule, we now have AM and PM. Anyways, so it ended up being that I didn't have a prep. And then I had forgotten that during lunch that I oversee some students doing a directed study of AP Environmental Science, which I've completely neglected. And so I basically had class from 8 to 11, and then an hour from 11 to noon, which was my lunch break, to talk to these kids about ozone depletion and the stratosphere. And then the first period class shows up to my classroom that I'm subbing for this other teacher. And so then by the time my second period class started in the afternoon, I was supposed to meet a kid on Zoom, and I was late, and then I had to pee because I'd been gone all day, or going all day. And so I started the Zoom at my computer, and then ran to the bathroom, ran into the vice principal on the way, and started chatting and was hanging out and stuff. And then the bell rang, and my kids are all in there. And so I'm like, oh, I'll just be chill, start class. And then I start class, and things are going. And then 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh my God, I have 5 kids on Zoom that are facing the back wall because I didn't turn the webcam. And so I go over to my computer, and there's all these kids waving at me hello, help us. And I had muted my computer, and I had muted myself, and there's all these comments in the chat, and I was just oh my God, I'm so sorry. And we only have 42 minutes anyway, so I'd wasted 10 minutes of their time. It was I couldn't help but just laugh, because it was of course this is going to happen on our third day of this Zoom and in-person teaching at the same time. And then it just ruined the rest of my day, because then I couldn't get it back together after that, because I was anyways, it was so funny. And also, that's our life.
It's so hard to recover from in a good way. If you have classes afterwards, it's just grumpy the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think we should also point out, Molly and I talked about this, because I also ended up subbing for this teacher during my prep, so I lost my prep. When you lose your prep that way, but especially for Molly, because she lost her lunch too, you don't ever get a mask break. I didn't really realize how important the mask break is, even if it's just for 5 minutes. So Molly went the whole entire day wearing her mask and not eating lunch, which is crazy.
But I did it.
Yeah.
Malia, what's your biggest failure?
Well, I'm gonna also blame the fact that I had to sub last minute for a colleague. I got to my fourth period. So we're only Zooming in the afternoons, not in the mornings. So we have a morning cohort and an afternoon cohort, but we're Zooming with our remote students while we're also doing our afternoon cohort. So you're repeating the same lesson, but now you have a Zoom factor too. In my fourth period, I got to about, it started at 2:18 and I got to about 2:38. And one of my students said, Summer Singer, isn't there supposed to be someone on Zoom right now? And I hadn't even started the Zoom. Like the student, I had completely forgotten about her, like completely. And she had been emailing me full 9 yards. And I was so embarrassed that I had completely forgotten her. I should let you know though, while while she was being neglected, she emailed the vice principal and said, "Can I come back to in person? I don't want to do remote anymore." I felt horrible. Oh my gosh, so sorry. Oh well. Anyway, I don't think it was just because of me, but still, I'm sure it didn't help.
That's rough. I also have some kids on Zoom while I'm teaching a class, and it's bad. So it's just bad. It doesn't work. My biggest failure today was, so we're back in school, half classes in the AM, half classes in the PM. And so between classes, we have to spray cleaner on I have tables. So I have to spray the side of the table where kids sat and then tell the kids what side of the table to sit on. And I'd sprayed the tables and I'd gone to the bathroom and then I went to the computer to prep all my stuff for class. And I'm just cruising through and kids are coming in. And then maybe 3 or 4 minutes after class starts, I look up and they're just all standing. Because kids don't know how to check for the wet side of the table, but they just wait for you to tell them where to sit, and they've just been standing, waiting, and I'm just like, I look up, I'm just like, oh man, like, I feel really bad for you guys. But since you're standing, let's talk about yesterday's stuff. It was, I mean, doesn't seem that bad, but you start to realize that when you get a little busy and you completely ignore what's going on in front of you, it makes you feel a little vulnerable, like with the rest of what have I missed? What is going on? I could have helped my kids. They could have had their stuff out and I could have saved 3 minutes of class time already, but
So do you have to spray it and then let it air dry? Is that why?
yes. So we spray the side of the table where the previous kids sat, and then the kids can't sit on that side of the table.
Okay.
So that it has time to air dry and work. It takes time to work. It's
It's fascinating how all these districts have all these different policies about this stuff.
It's so weird.
There's no consistency.
Luckily, most of
We're
my
not
time
doing
is like I have prep period, then I have class, or I have class, then prep period. If I have prep, then class, then I have lunch afterwards. So the first half of my day is super easy because I have all the time in the world to do it, and then I can actually, because the stuff leaves like a gunk on the table, like an almost sticky, weird. So you really want to clean the stuff with like the other cleaner that you have, the blue cleaner. We have clear cleaner and blue cleaner, so you want to clean it up. But regardless, we're back for season 2. We are all back in school in some way, so definitely we probably only were thinking about this at the very end of the season, which we had some. Oh, hey, Malia, now that we're online here, did you put some of those on YouTube yet? Some of our late ones?
Yeah, sure. Yes, I did.
Yes. Okay, good. Because it's really important because yesterday they were like, hey, or 2 days ago they came in, they said, hey, I want to take a picture of you for our newspaper article about your podcast. And I was like, oh, we haven't recorded in like 2 months. I felt terrible. But then I posed and it got in the newspaper. So that was great. So I'll try to send you both a copy you can read, but I have to be honest, it just is me talking and it's terrible. It's so like I literally in the quote, the outset quote, it said, it's important to listen to other perspectives because I think I'm the center of the universe. And there's just a lot of quotes like that. Like, I'm just like, what didn't you use? Was there positive things that I said about myself or, it's bad.
Do you remember that you sent us the article?
I sent a photo.
Yeah.
Could you read it?
Yeah.
Oh, my wife was like, it's too small. I can't read it. And I was like, well, I don't do the finger thing.
Yeah.
Okay. We're good then. All right. So I don't think when I talk, I guess most of the time. All right. So we're all back at school. there's a ton of concerns. And in the near future, things could be changing again. So in the next week, my school district votes on whether or not we're coming back to school full time in our regular 85-minute schedule. Is there another change on the horizon for you guys as well, other than waiting to see if our school changes?
I think so. If your school changes, maybe that'll have an impact on our school. I don't know. I think the middle school and elementary schools might change, but not necessarily the high school.
And then right now we have half a school day, a break, and then half a school day. Half a school day being we have half of our students for the first half of the day, and we have the same class the second half of the day. But as my teachers and myself are thinking about coming back to school full time, there's a ton of concerns that I have. So today in this intro, we're just talking about all the concerns that we have so we can focus each of our future episodes on one singular concern. So that's what we're doing, is collecting a whole bunch of worries. My first worry is that when our students go from a 35-minute period schedule to an 85-minute period schedule, I think it's going to require a ton of reteaching by teachers to teach them how to learn in 85 minutes. And it's going to take a ton of teaching for teachers to teach them how to teach in 85 minutes, which we had been doing for the 2 years before COVID because we had just switched our schedule. But I don't know that our entire staff was really great at it at that time anyway. So that's my biggest concern.
Yeah, I have been thinking a lot about teaching practices as I myself have had to go back to being in person, which is on the one hand awesome and great because I feel like I'm doing my job again and I love it. But on the other hand, I have to remember how to teach in person. And I think all of us have to do that. But then thinking about engagement right now, because we're rusty, but the kids are rusty too. So my worry is about engagement and learning. It's quickly though, it's amazing to me. I don't know how you guys feel about this, how quickly I'm ready to just slough off all of those digital learning skills I've been learning, all that online teaching I've been learning how to do. Man, I am ready to just kind of throw it out the window. I can't believe how quickly I've been wanting to I want paper and pencil again. But I don't want us to go back necessarily to our quote unquote old ways. So when are we going to take the time to stop and reflect on what we want the return to be like and what do we want to keep from what have we learned? I don't want us this just to be just like a little blip the past year.
I worry about all of the things that you said. I had a moment. Do you ever find yourself, you're teaching actively and you know that the students are like checked out, but you're like, I've already taught this 5 times today and it is literally 10 minutes of your time. Like, so I was like going over a concept today that, yeah, all my other classes, it went totally fine. Like students were engaged, they asked questions. It wasn't the most compelling of subjects, but it was short. And then it was like, I just want to review this topic and then you're going to practice it and we're going to do this. And then I had one class today that ended the day, of course. And it was, oh my gosh, it was like looking out and the kids were just like glazed, like their eyes were unfocused. It was insane. And I was like, what am I even doing right now? But like, I can't just stop. I'm in the middle of talking about this concept. If I stop now, it's not going to make any sense. It's going to be almost like embarrassing if I just pause. And then, so that in my concern, yeah, is engagement. Like that was a 10-minute topic. How am I supposed to maintain engagement for 90 minutes? And then on top of that, I couldn't help but think to myself, like, I think these kids are probably struggling mentally with just being here. And so maybe there's this mental health thing that we're just ignoring completely. So I'm also concerned about that. Like if you ever feel so, you're checked out to a point where you're like, why am I learning this? It's not important. Like I worry that I'm not going to see that in my students and then be just pushing content down their throats, and then they're just like, I don't care, or this doesn't matter to me right now because I'm thinking about other things. So
yeah, coming back to the classroom at all, I think is really tempting to try to make up for all the content that we have not been able to cover because of how much time we haven't really been able to spend with students. And that's another fear that I have is people just pushing that through, giving them as much homework as we did when we started the Zooming, which didn't work out, and then feeling the pain of that whole mistake again. That's big deal stuff too. like trying to like I mean, I think it's better probably for all of us now that we're kind of in the classroom, re um reusing movement techniques,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like really being intentional about, oh man, even though the kids are here for 35 minutes, we probably should give them some time to stand up and walk around. How do we
yep,
do that in a way that engages and is connected to learning? That's people gonna have to be doing that all the time.
right. Or still do strategies where kids are talking to each other but maintaining 6 feet of distance, because you could do it.
Did you guys still
Although,
get to have 6 feet of distance?
yeah, I was going to say that might not really matter. Another concern I have that I shared in our first failed attempt to do this intro episode is I'm nervous about hearing the phrase, this student isn't ready. And especially maybe next September when we
Yeah,
come back and
next year.
when we're more fully back, hearing people saying, oh, and even myself saying it to myself, this student isn't ready for this, and using that as an excuse for why, instead of saying, what do I need to do in the classroom right now to help this student be ready? Because the reality is we're going to have a bunch of students in different places because everyone's had a very different experience of the pandemic. But yeah, I'm super nervous about hearing that phrase. And it goes back to blaming the student for the circumstances that are outside of their control. So yeah,
Malia, are you talking about like academically, socially, emotionally, or what?
All of those things.
all of those things really, but where it first kind of hits me is thinking about academically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like if you teach an advanced freshman English class and you're like, well, this kid's just not ready for this class. Let's just put him into
exactly,
a freshman English class so that he's removed from my vicinity and someone else has to deal with that instead of me figuring out what I have to do to help that student be prepared for what we are doing. Yeah, because they're still
right.
going to be our responsibility
Mm-hmm.
unless we can shuck them off on someone else, which is like terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm concerned about the idea of and I guess I'm really focusing on academics when I think about it a little bit, but academic preparedness, and we talk about that sometimes in education, and well, nobody's prepared right now. I mean, honestly, but our students have had such different experiences of math and English and science and social studies and the electives that yeah, and then the timing is different for high school than elementary. Like my elementary age daughter is going to have more time,
To make up
more
for
of a
that.
cushion before she has
Mhm.
to graduate, but like next year's senior class is going to feel a lot of pressure to suddenly be seniors, right? Even though they're missing such a big chunk of time. And part of that means we need to change our expectations. Like I totally understand that, but also within that we have to figure out ways to scaffold, like really. And I guess that's where what I'm thinking about is that like along with engagement, like part of me thinks one of the things we need to do in August is some like really intensive teacher training, reminding each other this is what teaching in person looks like, and this is how we scaffold so that students can hit it no matter where they come into your classroom at.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually have a good follow-up is that I worry that we won't have that opportunity. And that I also worry that we're not gonna, like, maybe the kids just need to get there, and that we need to maybe start slowly or do something different to start the year than we normally would to like help kids re-enter into like this world of like full-time school. And I worry that we'll miss an opportunity to do that well. And I don't know how to do it well, and that I like want guidance on how to do that. And we have time to figure it out. So I'm
I have a
hopeful that we can.
Sorry. I also have a fear that teachers are it's going to be really tempting to be inflexible next year. So we have the excuse of saying, look, we were so flexible during COVID. And now that we're back to normal, you admin, districts, parents, you need to step back so I can do what I need to do. But if we're going to be providing supports for students coming back, things might have to change. And the way we do our classes might have to change as a system just to help those students re-enter into school. And if we can't get flexibility across the board, it's going to be really, really hard to give students and equitable experience in education.
We've done so much reacting that it's kind of like beyond important that, Molly, what you're talking about, and Brian also, what it makes me think of is this whole idea of re-entry. It needs to be really well thought out, because in some ways, if we mess it up, we're going to lose them, because they know that they can get lost, and they know that they have other, you know what I mean? Like, they know there's more out there than, yeah. And so, yeah, in Avid, we deal a lot with kids who have circumstances outside of their control that make it very difficult for them to get to where they want to be, right? So Avid provides that extra support and scaffold. And as I worked more intensely with my Avid students last couple of weeks, now that I'm in person and we don't have this like camera thing that we're trying to communicate with, it's just dawned on me that the system has always been stacked so that some kids get lost. And then kids got even more lost in the pandemic. And I don't want when we come back, those kids to get even more lost and more damaged by our decisions that we make.
Yeah, how are we gonna, so, I mean, there's a lot of conflict in my district about whether we should go back, and teachers feel so many different ways, and parents feel different ways, and students feel different ways. I've had students ask me this week, it's been pretty contentious because we gave surveys out to students. And students just like, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I mean, do I want to come back? No, I like what we're doing right now, and it's working, and it feels like we can be comfortable in it. But there are students who are having major obstacles take over and destroy the growth that they've had over years. And if we can't get those students back in school, yeah, like you're saying, Malia, they can be lost for good. And if it means that we have to bring every single person back to school in order to get those kids back in school, then I've got to be in school so I can make sure those kids back in school. I'd love to bring just those kids back and then to slowly bring more people in. But financially, that's not really an option. Bus schedules, finances, that's not an option in Washington State right now. Not really. So yes, we can't just like not support those kids, or we can't just support those kids. We have to go over and above to float those kids like far above the obstacles that they have had set up on top of the obstacles they already had. And it's going to be, so much work.
So you know the tiered approach to interventions, right? Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So there's the tiers that are about intervention that involves bringing in like an intervention specialist or pulling the student out. And there's money coming in for those tiers. I mean, districts are already starting to hire for that. But tier 1 is the one that we all gotta like remember. That's in the classroom. Like, what are we doing in the classroom to intervene? That's what we need to really be deliberate about. What are we gonna do? And we're not gonna get everyone, but at least we're gonna try, right?
We sure hope. So these are all fantastic concerns that we hope are gonna guide our conversations this season as we delve into the world of, are we coming back to school, I guess. So exciting. I mean, we're at like 20 plus minutes. So I feel like it's time to like sign off. Last thoughts from Molly, because it's been a while.
I like listening. I working on not talking as much. I don't really have anything.
Please don't work on that. Work on talking more, because I talk way too much, I think.
But you're good. You're fun to listen to. My dad thinks so. I don't know if I told you that. These will be my last words. I sent these links to my dad, and my dad was like, "The guy with the beard is hilarious. Like, I want to listen to him talk more."
Oh man, if I talk too much, I get in trouble. That's just how it's always going to work too. So, well, to your dad, hey, thank you very much, especially for acknowledging my beard. All right, last thoughts before we sign out.
Last thoughts. I'm tired. Yeah. I guess my last thought, oh man, I feel like I'm ending on a downer.
That's, you know what? We started on a downer, so that's a downer sandwich.
Two negatives make a positive, right?
I guess my last thought is so we're all feeling really good right now as things get looser. The governor made another amazing announcement today about things like people are going to be able to visit their relatives in long-term care facilities and all this kind of stuff, right? Like things are just going really well. Sorry, just a second. That's my dog. But I don't want us to think that, oh, when school comes back in session, the crisis is over. Like, I don't think the crisis is going to be over. It might be just beginning. But I feel like such a downer for saying that. Oh,
Right? Well, it's what you're doing is you're preparing, right? You
Yeah.
are pre-acting instead
Yeah.
of reacting.
I guess the uplifting part of this, though, Brian and Molly, is that I have faith in our profession. Like, we teachers really care, and they are really, really good at what they do. And so, and I think we saw that by how many teachers really did rise to the challenge of trying to figure out this whole online learning. And I know we're going to rise to the challenge again as a group. So I have faith, like for my own children, I know it's going to happen, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for all of us. We're going to have to help each other out a lot.
I have a second last word because I'm really glad you bring that up, Malia, because that is like, we can't ignore the last year, right? And I do factor worries. Like, I worry that we're going to be like, okay, back to normal. Let's just like cruise forward as if like we haven't all had this like year from hell, basically. And so maybe the pandemic, like COVID crisis might wind down, but like we're going to look at a mental health crisis that is going to affect, or it has already affected so many people in ways that I don't think we are fully aware of yet.
Man, you guys, I think you both said it perfectly. So once again, thank you for watching and listening. This is Teachers Talk with Brian Higgins, Malia Renner-Singer, and Molly Rabbits. Caesar's not here today, but he'll be here next time. If you want, subscribe or like, or just don't watch video. It's your choice. I mean, I believe in the freedom of the individual. So thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful week.